Chris Watkins joins us, who just booked it from the building to our building. And I don't want to waste very much time here, Chris. I have a lot of notes that I took down, but you were in the building. I said the TLDR of this is they don't know if they're going to move forward with Doug Christie, and very similar to Mike Brown, possession after possession after possession. It's also sustainability. And it felt from the outside looking in, just listening to Sac Media, and like I said, Sac Media I thought did a great job. Tried to get more in the weeds with the autonomy and where Vivek fits on all this. He did a great job. He's got a lot of great media training. He's done TV. He's done podcasts. He told us about Hoop Genius a couple times.
Felt
there.
like I was in a Patrick Beverly interview.
Well, is he still going to do Hoop Genius?
Like,
what's going on there?
Plug?
Right. Shout out to Hoop Genius.
I guess.
And he found a way to not say certain things, which is what you would expect. He got asked about Keegan. I thought his most direct answer was probably about Zach LaVine and Doug Christie. Everything else was kind of what you'd expect. Give us your initial thoughts. You were in the building on Scott Perry, and some people are saying, I feel great about him. This is Monty McNair can never do this. Yeah. And other people are saying it doesn't matter because, Vivek is going to make the decisions anyway. Sure. What's your take on it?
I would say just a little bit. I was more so concerned for the latter that, this would be, this is hiring Vlade without hiring Vlade, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
Was kind of my initial fear with all of this, is like, especially just with the speed in which the hiring happened. I was like, all right, like this is very clearly like a Vivek, like I singled this guy out as someone who would do what I want him to do.
And he asked that question, I keep going, but he asked that question, or someone asked that question. I think it might have been Sean. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Sean said things happen, or it might have been Tony. Things happen pretty quickly. What was the timeline? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, we've known each other for a long time. And when you have a relationship, things can move quickly. So he didn't really answer.
Yeah.
And he's not going to.
No, he's
hey,
not going to.
Was this happening behind Monty's back? Was essentially the question. You're not going to answer that.
No, you're not. But to the point of what you just kind of listed out, the one thing that definitely stuck out is Scott Perry wanted everyone to know, and I think it's just because it is a fact, and it might be one of the main reasons why he was hired, is this guy knows everybody. Like, he's been around the league. He is not. I was just telling Brenden, I'll just say, for lack of a better term, like, he's not an idiot, right? Yeah. Like, this is a guy who very much knows what he's doing, is very confident in saying what he does know and why he knows that. Use the term institutional knowledge, which is, just really, I think, highlighting the fact that he is in this position because he from a lot of people's perspective, like, knows what he is going to do, or at least knows how to do the job. And I still think it does present the question of, will he be allowed to do the job? But
hold on, let me see here.
I was like,
let me see here.
Please give the concrete words given on that.
I've worked with Vivek before. He has empowered me to make critical decisions. Will I talk to him about certain decisions? And then I'm paraphrasing here. Yeah. Absolutely. And here's the quote: we're going to operate with diversity of thought and unity of purpose. I might get that tattooed.
That's a good one.
He had some bangers. He had some bars.
Literally the last thing he said was that quote right there. And it was a very good drop the mic quote. And I think another one, which we ended up posting on our Instagram, was I don't fear. Well, I don't want to misquote.
Oh, yes.
I enjoy challenges. Yes. I don't run from challenges. I run to them.
Yes.
Which I thought was, again, just another bar. And again, I think it really just, if anything, like, a lot has been talked about. Oh, the Kings have hired their last 4 or whatever GM jobs. The person who's taken that job has been new to that job. Again, that is spoken with a level of confidence of somebody who I can't remember if Scott Perry has ever officially held the GM title. Like, he's been assistant of basketball operations last time he was here in Sacramento.
Right.
I don't know if he's officially held the GM title before, but it's just somebody who's very confident. Like, this is not his first time speaking in front of a room of media members.
You could tell.
He's just so comfortable, so confident. I think you can read from that, like you said, some people are reading that as, oh, I have all the faith in the world in this guy. Monty could never, he's going to be able to wheel and deal and do all this stuff. I'm just confident because of his level of confidence. I get it. I just, I've not saying anything about Scott Perry, but we've been fooled by smooth talkers before. And, he definitely sounds like somebody who will, be about his business, be about his words, but it's just the nature of the job. You're going to be graded on what you actually do, not, as we found out with Monty, not what was said you could have done or what you want to do. You're based off of what you actually do. So that's still very TBD. I heard, he's been credited with, drafting a ton of good players in the past, Mitchell Robinson, Quentin Grimes, Aaron Gordon. There's been others that he's been credited with taking, but I just think, for here in Sacramento, he says he's not going to run from the challenge, but it is a massive, massive challenge. And I thought Whitey asked him a great question of like, there are a lot of challenges. How do you even know which one to attack first? And I think that's going to be really interesting. I think obviously it's going to be head coach, but just to see what Scott kind of determines is the biggest needs that need to be addressed immediately, I think is going to be super interesting.
Yeah, he also said, he answered, I have part of his question. Again, we're playing it again at 12. I'm always conscious of one decision leading to a multitude of other decisions. So that's part of his answer to Whitey's question. And again, there are some things he could answer and not answer. Right. Hoop Genius podcast is in the Sac Chat, by the way. So shout out to the Hoop Genius podcast.
Absolutely.
And as we are continuing with our insiders, Chris Watkins
They're always
in the building.
watching, man. You never know.
That's right. Chris Watkins in the building.
It might be Scott. What up, Scott?
And Brenden Nunes is now joining us. And both of these guys are in the building. Brenden, you asked one of the questions. I tried to write down who was asking these questions, but I was trying to get everything. I have a list as Brenden gets all set up here of the bars. Okay. I have a list of the bars. The first one,
Full 16.
Establishing identity for toughness, defensive orientation, play hard, play together, share the game. Yeah. That's one of the bars. Share the game, discipline, accountability. And then he goes on to say, I'm looking for volunteers to that. Not hostages. That's a bar right there.
That's for sure.
The other one, I have another one. I want to buy each player a mirror so they can look themselves in the face every single day.
I got another one for you.
I got them all. Let me know if I miss one. I don't run from problems. I run to them. Yep. Okay. I operate with radical candor and radical love. And like we talked about, diversity of thought, unity of purpose.
Yep, that's the bar. I want diversity of thought, but with unity of purpose.
Yeah, I'm getting that tatted.
Yeah,
after the show.
There's a lot of them. I think he said all the right things. Mm-hmm. Like, it's also the easiest part of all of this in my mind to say the right things. But if you're great in the press conference, I think that's a solid A. Like, he did a good job. He came out there and answered the questions. I think the Doug Christie thing is one of the more interesting aspects here, because all the behind the scenes stuff is that Doug is going to get this job, and he seemed a little more up in the air, but it's one of those instances where you got to kind of, you have to say certain things in a way. So I don't know what to make necessarily of all that, but hearing him talk about obviously the need for a point guard, but also for length and athleticism to enable the guys that are currently on this roster, or his response to the Zach LaVine clip that obviously had been going around and saying that they had a good conversation, but now it's his job to put pieces around him, meaning Zach and others, to enhance his ability to start winning. It felt like he was expressing that he feels like there's decent talent on this roster already. And if we get the right complementary pieces, we can optimize this a little bit more so, while obviously, mentioning that he has good connections and there's going to be external improvement here as well.
Yeah, the reality is we're sitting here and, I was listening to the Drive guys as well, and we can go through all of the draft decisions that he made. But my brothers, we don't have a draft pick, or there's a 97% chance that we will not have a draft pick. So I want to kind of break down the wheeling and dealing that might happen outside of the draft, because that's all fine and good. He was a part of drafting De'Aaron Fox, but come a couple months from now, we might not have there's a very good chance that we don't have a draft pick. So how do we feel about his ability to kind of wheel and deal besides the draft? And we're going to break all that down. Two of our insiders that were in the building for Scott Perry's press conference. We will be right back. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports. Here with Chris Watkins and Brenden Nunes, who are in the building. By the way, we're still taking your calls. 916-339-1140, a little impromptu Kings triangle. We are replaying the Scott Perry intro presser at 12 o'clock if you missed it, so you can enjoy your lunch and listen to Scott Perry talk about sustainability and the idea of building around Zach LaVine and Doug Christie not getting any promises. And let's start with this, Brenden. I'm on record when everything went down with Monty McNair and how quick everything happened. My assumption was, okay, Scott Perry, and he was asked about how quickly it happened, and he kind of, well, when you know somebody, the relationships.
I mean, you can't really answer that.
No,
question,
he
to be honest.
He can't. So he did what he had to do. But my understanding or my thought process was, if he got hired this quickly, he was probably on board with Doug Christie. Somebody just asked, do you think he'll trade Domantas Sabonis? Somebody asked it on the text line. As we learned with De'Aaron Fox and Mike Brown, this stuff can all be connected. And we know that Domantas Sabonis and Doug Christie very much connected. They have a very close relationship. So I just assumed all this was connected, and they will probably hold on to Doug Christie, which is why they were able to make this decision so quickly. After his statements, I might be falling for the media background and him just being good at doing the thing. But after listening to it, I thought, okay. And the phone calls ringing off the hook, he played that perfectly. He got me. Part of me thinks, is he just really good at playing the game? And it is Doug Christie, and he's making it seem like this is a very sought after job. Or is it the real deal? What were your thoughts on the Doug Christie of it all?
Yeah, I mean, again, just to reiterate, everything I've been told is that Doug is going to be the guy. So I will say I have to re-listen to that, and obviously I'm going to write it up right after this. So maybe as I rehear some of this stuff, my opinions will change. Mm-hmm. But the fact, I thought that we were going to have this press conference and that it was going to be Doug Christie sitting next to him. Obviously, that would have meant in the days leading up to this that Doug would have been announced.
Yes.
But obviously that didn't be the case. And since that we're not already at that point, I don't expect him to come out and be like, yes, we're going to hire Doug Christie. They're not going to announce it in that press conference.
No.
You know what I mean? So I kind of did think it was a little bit of, playing to the PR answer, which is what he's supposed to do when he's up there.
But you think it's still Doug?
I think it's Doug. Yeah, I pretty not long after their season ended, I heard from a couple places that it's probably going to be Doug. And so I don't think that anything necessarily that took place today did enough to sway me from what I had already heard, I guess I would say.
Chris, do you think it should be Doug?
Oof.
Why would you switch that?
Well, no.
I was already
ready
to answer that part of the question.
Say what you were going to say.
Because I don't want to have to answer. Yeah.
Say
You made me do the
John
Morant celebration over here.
Say what you were going to say. That's my fault.
No, it's just more I don't want to answer that question. Yeah, I would say that I walked into that press conference more so thinking how Brenden laid out that this is just a formality. Everything I had heard seemed to be things pointing towards Doug, but then the reality of the fact that, hey, that probably would have been a really easy kill two birds with one stone press conference.
Yeah,
now we have
it's
to show up next week. Scott Perry's, granted, of course, the first question was going to be, where's the coaching search going? But I think the fact that he did acknowledge I've known Doug for a while, but I also am gonna open this up. It just definitely, I feel more today right now that it is truly an open coaching search than I have since the season ended.
Yeah.
And whether that's just, Scott doing politics or doing exactly what we asked this organization to do, in terms of trying to actually get the best person and not just taking somebody who's the first person available. I do appreciate that. And I'm not sure how much is lip service and how much of it is true, but if you're just asking my opinion on it, it seemed to me like it is more open than what I think people are giving it credit for. Not even saying that maybe Doug hasn't gotten assurances or anything like that, but to me, it definitely didn't seem like they're, Doug's in the next room over just, waiting for it to be official.
I think the other interesting part here is there's a coaching staff, but there's also an entire front office staff that he has to sort of create himself.
And he said he's not even, he hasn't even
got
dug
here
into
yesterday.
that.
He said he got here yesterday.
And to pull back the curtain a little bit, like Phil Jabor, assistant general manager, is sitting right there in the front seat. Paul Johnson was previously GM of the Stockton Kings, had been in the front office for the last 2 years. Well, both are in the front office, but you get my point here. Was sitting right there. Alvin Gentry, a little bit of a different role, obviously more advisor, sitting right there, and I can't help but kind of look at their faces when Scott Perry's getting asked about the front office, but he said, I'm paraphrasing, it's going to be a long, extensive process, and he'll see who fits with our vision and who doesn't agree with it. But, makes me wonder. I don't feel like those guys would be in the room if there wasn't a chance that they were going to stick around.
Yeah.
Agreed.
When you look at what Scott Perry continued to say as far as the coach is concerned, that to me is when it kind of turns into media speak, because he talks about the identity, he talks about the coach, and all those things you could say is Doug Christie, defensive mindset, accountability, toughness. All those things you could say is Doug Christie. All those things you could also say was Mike Brown.
100%.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's really just any coach. No coach is going to go – nobody's going to go up there and say, yeah, I'm really just trying to run and gun, and like defense is – I mean, sometimes
Mike D'Antoni's not going to be our coach. That's what we learned.
Exactly.
You could say Monty McNair too, by the way.
Yes.
Was that different than what Monty said when he first got here?
No. So I try to kind of go in between the lines as far as what they say and what exactly we should take away from this stuff. I think the way he kind of avoided or just didn't speak to the Vivek stuff is exactly what he should have done. I mean, what are you going to do there? Look, kudos to Sac Media for asking the questions, but he's not going to answer it. There's no way for him to answer it. I did think, and I believe this was Jason Anderson, is there one thing that ownership wanted you to fix? And then he went back again, and I got it right here. It is to build a platform for sustainability and success. Vivek has pledged support to see that vision through. And then that's when he said, no updates on staff yet. The reality is, when it comes to the coaching staff, this is what I think the situation is. Doug is our guy. This is what I believe Vivek said. This is not sourced. This is just my opinion. Doug is our guy unless you convince X, Y, and Z to come here. And that X could be Taylor Jenkins. That Y could be I don't think Boone. I think Budenholzer, that ring is a little dusty now. I think
Dave
Budenholzer. I'm saying there's a list.
Frank Vogel.
There's a list. It could be.
Yeah.
It feels like Nick Nurse is probably going to stay in Philly, but we'll see what happens there. I think it probably would have already happened, but I think there's a list of maybe 3. If you can convince one of those guys, then fine. If it ain't one of those guys, it's Doug. That's what I think the situation is.
Or an interesting aspect of this, which is honestly just kind of crossing my mind now, is like, or we're talking about those guys as lead assistants. And the complicated thing here is like, all right, if it is Doug, who's building out the assistants? Is it Scott or is it Doug? Because a lot of what just happened in Memphis was that Taylor Jenkins last offseason, the whole front office was like, hey, we're going to rework your entire coaching staff.
And what
if
happened
those dudes
there?
aren't aligned,
right.
And you bring in a highly qualified assistant. To be honest, he's going to be more qualified for the head coach job than Doug Christie.
Right.
And that could be healthy, but it also could create a weird dynamic.
But they did the same thing with JJ Redick, though, no?
Yes, and JJ has handled it well. JJ is the counter.
And they have LeBron, who's actually the
Doug
coach,
being like inexperienced, but he does obviously have the player background. JJ is the counter. But I will say JJ also gets talked about like he's an X's and O's freak.
Right.
And that's not exactly Doug's wheelhouse. Like I forget which player it is in exit interviews described him as a player's coach.
Yes.
Which is fine. There's value in that. And I think in the modern NBA, you kind of have to be a player's coach. So this isn't meaning to crap on Doug, but yes, JJ is the counter of making this a somewhat healthy environment.
But when his whole, like you said, his shtick is the X's and O's, that part you can defend. If you're in the rah-rah Nick Sirianni, Mike Tomlin area, then when something goes wrong and it's, oh, well, our defensive coordinator or our offensive coordinator said whatever, then it turns into, well, Doug, what exactly is it that you do here, which can get a little bit sticky.
Yeah, I mean it's exactly what Brenden just laid out. It's the reason why it's definitely something to monitor. If Scott Perry's going to be the one who, even if it is kind of in lockstep with Doug, but if you do see a Dave Yeager or a Taylor Jenkins or whoever, a big name, be a lead assistant, it's definitely going to perk, I think, a lot of people's ears up and say like, okay, well, what are the odds that this is more so a fail safe than anything? That it's, hey, Vivek, like I played ball with you. Like I let, we quote unquote came to an agreement on Doug, but can we kind of let, and Scott Perry kind of did say, and not to say that he's, answering other questions within his other answers, but he did kind of say that he has a North Star, that he's kind of has a vision of this team that I think he wants to get to. And I don't know. I mean, I just wonder if when you think of the best possible vision for a team that you're taking over, I just don't think that you're envisioning, this first year guy who, took over midseason and, coached them a little bit over 500. Like, I just don't, I don't think that that's your ultimate, if I could do anything with this team. I don't think that's the vision that a lot of people would end up having.
Is it crazy to say that what happened in Golden One, what was that, just last week?
It was last week.
Wednesday?
It's been
Wednesday?
Literally a week ago.
Monday. It was Monday, yeah.
That feels like so
wow, it
long
was
ago.
1 week? Because we did our show the day after. So it was.
Yeah.
Is it crazy to say that what happened last week in the Golden One Center
1 week
might determine what happens with Doug Christie? Let's break it down. One more segment. You guys got one more?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. One more segment. Did what happened last week seal Doug Christie's fate one way or the other? Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports. Chris Watkins, Brenden Nunes joins us here on Sactown Sports. And we're talking about a lot of things during the break, just what's going on in the media. It's crazy out here in these streets. But getting back to Scott Perry and
You're the crazy one, by the way.
And his intro presser, guys. If you were Scott Perry, I know that we've, and we're going to replay it in 15 minutes here if you missed it. Scott Perry's intro presser was only one mic, by the way. Podium Gate, one mic. Were you surprised that there was only one mic, or is this kind of on brand?
Talking ownership?
Maybe.
Like I said earlier, I thought there would be two because I thought we would have already had the Doug Christie announcement by now.
Yeah.
I would have appreciated hearing from Vivek, but no, I'm not surprised that didn't happen.
Okay.
I don't think any of us really are, right?
Yeah. No, the reason why, which I understand, but I don't, it's a problem of your own creation is, if Vivek's sitting out there, then Scott Perry's probably getting 3 questions.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. I mean, it's frankly, at this point, it's been so long since we've been able to talk to Vivek about basketball and not about the A's that, I think that there's enough questions to probably fill 30, who even knows, might be an hour based off of how many questions people have. So if they are ever eventually going to do a Vivek presser, I would hope that it is just him and that he is freely open to answer questions. I just don't think so.
I think that's a really good point because I think you can relate it to the Monty not talking after firing Mike Brown thing earlier. And then they end up trading for Zach LaVine. And it's like, it may have been same day they held a Monty only presser and then Monty next to Zach because going into that, hey, if you sit Zach up there, he's gonna have to sit there and listen to about Mike Brown and Darren Fox the entire time because that had not been addressed yet. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, my takeaway is we'll have to wait and see. I think Scott Perry said all the right things. I think
100%.
Most GMs, besides Adam Gase when he had the eyes going on, most of the time these pressers go pretty well, but it's about action, right? And where do you start? Do you decide where you start? Does Vivek decide where you start? I think the coach is first, right?
It has to be, yeah, you would think. I mean, like public facing, yeah, like I'm sure to Brendan's earlier point, like I'm sure he's going to fill out his front office to however, cap experts and scouts maybe, but we're not going to hear about any, like the ones that are actually going to impact and be names that we care about. Like, yeah, it's got to be coach first. And then After that, I don't know. Like, do you start? I mean, I guess he kind of mentioned already talking to Zach LaVine, but I would guess that's probably where you would start, right? Like Trey Lyles is your biggest free agent. I don't think that's like 100%. Hey, let's get Trey on the phone the second I land. So yeah, I would think after that, next order of business is probably figuring out which one of your stars wants to be here, which ones want to go, and then using Scott Perry's massive Rolodex to kind of see what's available for those guys.
Yeah, I wish he would have got asked about Domas, and I know that I was there. Asked a different question. All right,
medium,
hate
man.
me.
Yeah. You asked it was just an easy out.
Hey, you get one of those first questions.
Sustainability.
It's an easy one.
That's
All
right.
What's the identity of this team? I thought he gave a great answer for what it's worth. He told me great question. Now
he did. Eventually, he got there.
Yeah. I think that Chris is on point with that. I mean, you got to figure out Domas. I would say Zach seems to very much appreciate being wanted by an organization, and I think it's pretty obvious that goes up to ownership. And so you'd imagine that obviously Perry is going to echo that. And then it's about Domas, it's about DeMar, it's Malik, and seeing where these guys are at. Keon is a big question mark on how you're going to move forward with that. Not one of like the top players on the team, but obviously we know his importance to this roster and his complicated free agency or potential free agency coming up here. But yeah, I mean, I think first order of business is you got to figure out, all right, Domas, like you said, you want to be involved in this. What does that look like? This is what I'm thinking. How are you feeling about your future? And that's probably the main piece to me. I'm more so leaning towards DeMar, probably looking around and being like, yeah, I don't know about all this, but that's less sourced and more so I kind of feel like it's obvious based on DeMar talking about this being the toughest season I've had to endure. I'm not going to play for another 4 or 5. So I think conversations need to sort of be had with Domas, but Scott said that he's talked to every single player so far. Obviously, you'd imagine that's only surface level up to this point, though.
Yeah, the Domantas Sabonis piece, the bottom line is, hey, you say you want to be involved in this. Does that just mean that you want to tell us that you want Doug Christie to be the coach? And if Doug Christie isn't the coach, how much do you still want to be involved? I almost want to prepare fans really for the reality is that when you're a 9 seed, and the only reason you probably held on to the 9 seed is because of catastrophic injuries to the Mavs. You could also argue to the Spurs as well, and just the Suns being a disaster. Anything can happen. So some of the players that we've held in high regard and are really good stories, and you kind of triggered me on this, Brenden, when you mentioned Keon Ellis. Keon Ellis is a guy that the Kings might have to lose. I'm not saying they're going to, but when you're a 9 seed and you're trying to build from the bottom up, really, there's just going to be collateral damage. You look at the Keegan Murrays of the world, and that's probably the best quote unquote young talent that you have, and he's not terribly young anymore as far as NBA standards. So I just want to prepare the people. Scott Perry is coming in with no connections to anyone.
Right.
And
well, what I would counter there is, as he's kind of flexed on us, I think understandably so, is that he has maybe not connections with these players,
right,
but with their agencies.
Sure.
And I think that's important. And the way that he's sort of, like I said, flexing all that, I've heard all the same stuff about Scott Perry, that is what maybe one of his biggest strengths is the connections that he has throughout the league. All the head coach candidates, I already know these guys. I think it goes the same for the agency. And Keon just switched to a more like mainstream agency this year at Priority Sports. I'd imagine that Scott has relationships with those guys. So while it may not be the player directly, their representation, having a relationship with them, I think does hold some weight.
Yeah, I mean, as far as if you want to move somebody, it's not about keeping them. It's more about, if I want to move Malik Monk, it's cool that you guys brought him in on a last chance U deal, and now he's the pizza guy, but he's got to go. Right. That's what I'm saying. There's no connection.
I think it probably applies more to like a Devin Carter, maybe a Keegan than a Keon. Like Keon to me is just like, he makes so little money at the moment that it wouldn't really make sense for them to move on from him. But like Devin Carter, he's, yes, he might have connection with the agency, but like, he's not going to view him as, this is like our pick. This is our young player that we have.
No Matas Buzelis.
He's exactly.
Like Keegan was Monty's baby.
Exactly. Yes. He is just a piece that could potentially get to a greater means. I would think for Scott Perry. Now, it might be cold-blooded, but like I do think that's how, especially when you're just freshly walking into a situation, you can't have emotional ties to these guys. You have to view them all as independent assets and really kind of, to use Doug's term, like it's faceless. Like you got to just think of them as assets at this point.
Did you say cold-blooded or gold?
Definitely not gold.
Oh, cold.
That's for
Okay.
sure.
They
Definitely,
do
play
play
cold-blooded.
play
Definitely
tonight.
don't want to be gold-blooded.
Last question, and we'll keep it simple here, guys. We'll start with you, Brenden, then we'll go to Chris. Do you feel better, worse, or the same after the Scott Perry presser?
I guess better. I mean, I think slowly leading up to this, like I kind of take issue with the process of all of it, but that doesn't mean that Perry is a bad hire, you know? And so I think I've started to slowly sort of, embrace more of the latter portion of that. And like, all right, we can still talk about the process. It's its own separate conversation. But again, everything I've heard about Perry is that he's extremely well respected. I did really like, I think one of the things that stood out to me is him talking about the accountability that he wants to have. And you hear everybody say that, but I think him really highlighting the necessary consistency with that accountability.
Accountability has to be established every day or all the time, basically.
Right. That it can't be, all right, we're holding everybody accountable the first couple months, and then, hey, we reach February, and it's like, all right, well, you're the best player on the team, so I don't know about that. Like, I think that that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think something that could have been an issue previously, not only here, but in many organizations around the NBA. So as much as, these guys have to be faceless, you have to have a little bit of like a money ball, this is business when it comes down to it. I'm listening to a lot of his, Hoop Genius pod throughout the last couple weeks too. Yep. Oh yeah. They got a whole lot of plugs today. If you're still listening out there, great work, by the way. I like those dudes.
Yeah.
That, he's constantly communicating with these guys. And if that actually plays out in the way that he's expressing, I think that is potentially one of the bigger differences here, because Monty was such a ghost behind the scenes while Wes Wilcox was more of the front facing guy in all of this. That maybe that's one of the bigger changes that they're sort of looking at here. It definitely perked my ears up, and I'm hopeful about Perry being a good hire, I guess I would say. So more optimistic, I guess.
Okay. Better.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little bit more optimistic to kind of build off what Brenden was just saying there. Like, I do kind of think just like on a human level, more so from like running a business standard, I feel like Scott Perry is a great kind of CEO type guy, to cross sports. Like, you can have your Nick Sabans, your program builders, you can have your, you can have your players, guys, your recruiters, all those kind of things. Scott Perry to me seems like the kind of guy, and he even mentioned like it's about the people that you bring in more so than maybe being just as important as the structure you lay. And I think that's the kind of mentality that I hope, just brings a better organization to this team is by bringing in good people who are actually trying to do their jobs. And not that wasn't there before, but to me, it just seems like Scott Perry, to Brendan's communication point, like really has a good grasp of a healthy work environment, which again isn't really having to do with sports, but I do think he just seems like somebody who I would trust to have in charge of all the things like this. I think the problem becomes, I felt the same way about Mike Brown day one. And I think it's more just, if we're talking 2 years from now, does Scott Perry, and of course things change and you learn more about the place you work as you're there for longer. But, does Scott Perry kind of still share all of those same feelings and visions 2 years in, when maybe he's found, I thought I would have full autonomy here, but there was actually a lot more, checks and balances than I thought previously. So today I feel great, but it just needs to be different. I think ultimately this thing is going to be a hamster wheel until 2 years from now. We don't have to say, boy, what's crazy is, Mike Brown talking about vertical and horizontal alignment, and he didn't use the exact phrasing, but to me, a lot of the underlying messaging of what Scott Perry was saying today was, I need all of our coaches to be on the same level as me, and I need everyone who works under me to be pulling on the same string as me, which is horizontal and vertical alignment. So it's the same message, to your point of like the coaching. Like, you could describe that as Doug Christie, or you could describe it as Mike Brown. Like, I think we all know what needs to be fixed. It's just a matter of, at some point here, they have to be allowed to actually fix it. And I don't think I'm breaking news here, but it just, to me, like, again, the stability, all of it, like it just needs to actually be done in practice and not be done in press conferences.
He's Chris Watkins. That's Brenden Nunes, our Sactown Sports Kings insiders. Check out all of their work on the Kings. Sactown Sports social page, and also, of course, SactownSports.com. When we return, if you missed Scott Perry's interview, you're in luck. We're playing it in about 3 minutes. Allen Stiles, Sactown Sports.
For more than half a century,